corroded pipelines. That's very politically popular, but is it really fair? If we're concerned about the amount of money we're getting, you could bump up the percentage of the tax, but let them have a leeway as to their preventative maintenance program. I used to work for ARCO up on the slope, and they had a very excellent preventative maintenance program. They don't want things to break down, but sometimes turbines will go down unexpectedly, and that's just part of doing business. And even a pipeline that springs a leak or something, it's going to spray in a tundra, but it's cleaned up and no harm done, really, I mean, ultimately. And now we're concerned about the oil shutdown. We lost revenue, but so did the oil company. So they're motivated to not have breakdowns. So why not just, I don't mean long-winded, but, is there a chance that we get rid of this, let's just let them have all the deductions, and if we don't think we get enough money, bump up the tax rate. What do you think about that?
What would the average person do if we just let them have whatever deductions they want? They'd be real thorough with that. I don't think so.
Well, no, I mean, you can have, limit your deductions, but legitimate deductions, and get rid of the stuff of whether, were you negligent, were you not negligent? That gets into a myriad of fine-tooth picking that doesn't exist in the federal income tax system.
Well, that's true, but there's certain standard practices for maintenance, and you have to hold people at least to some standards, and that I think is what bothered most people about the corrosion problem, was that it had been neglected for an extremely long period of time. If you even compare to the other process with the Alaska line, and how often that line is picked compared to what was done there or not done there for years, as I understand it, with dump trucks full of sludge taken out of the pipe.
There were other things in the PPT that were, and I'm supporting going back and taking away that deduction. There's something else that we did in the PPT for me was phenomenally egregious on our part, and it reflects the muscle that the industry put on the legislature. We did a clawback. We could go back the industry could go back 5 years for capital deductions and subtract those out with PPT. They tell us that that something they're doing right now, they started planning 5 years ago. So 5 years before last year, the year before, seven years ago, when the price of oil was at 50 or 30 or somewhere in there, they made a deduction that it was economical then. They convinced the legislature, and something I didn't support, that they could go back and recoup all those prices at something that was economical at a much lower rate. And I don't understand why you would do that if you were sovereign, exercising your authority to do what's right. And I'll tell you something, I do agree with the industry. We should not be taxing them to get a certain amount of money every year. I think, and that's what you said, you'll have none of those guys agree with that. We should create a tax structure climate that is stable and makes sense, not for the amount of money, maybe for the amount of oil flowing through the oil line on a given year. But if we keep going back and saying, we got to raise more money because we're not getting in, there's a good chance we're going to have to find somebody else to do that, because I don't believe in that aspect of that policy.
Can you give a quick timeline of the history of the different changes? Just the recent changes at least?
Well, there was ELF. Yeah, ELF was put in place in 73, early 70s, and there was a coup in the legislature over that. And we knew that was broken for all of these years. We knew that was broken. The industry, producers wanted a gas line, so they agreed to negotiate with Murkowski over this PPT. Over the years, there were minor little tweakings of things, but that's basically since '73. It's been all these years, and we do the ELF policy was working to their benefit. Now we're at PPT, and now we're changing it a year later. Yeah. Oh, Richard, go ahead.
Through the history, the major change, so the ELF was revised in 1989, finally fixed. After the coup, they simply said the ELF will stay as it is through 87. We'll fix it then. Nobody did anything. And then in 1989, there was a major debate, and the ELF was revised and worked fairly well for a few years. It was revised shortly after the Exxon Valdez. So in terms of the broad history, I'm sure you would have thought of that if you're just handling a whole lot of questions, but that belongs in the mix of the broad history. That the ELF we fixed in '06, or tried to fix with the PPT, was the 1989 major revision to the ELF, which worked pretty well until '95 or so, but then was slowly, actually fairly rapidly, just eating up the severance tax. And that's why they thought it had to be fixed in '06.
Okay, I'm going to do it.
Go ahead, and then,
He hasn't asked any questions yet.
okay.
Just a quick one. You guys think it's realistic that anything's gonna happen in 30 days? You're gonna pass something? Has enough changed, do you know, that really something can happen?
My feeling is there hasn't been much change. Anderson got sentenced to 5 years today. You know, there are freshmen in there operating as if they expect to check the bill out right over their shoulder. I don't understand it, but I don't know. But whatever it is, it's gonna take 30 days to decide whether yes or no.
So we shouldn't get our expectations too high.
I think something could happen, whether it will or not, can't say until the time comes, but I think there's a lot of desire to change some aspects of it, maybe not all of it, and put in place a complete payment plan, but I think there is a lot of desire to, and there might be enough desire on both sides of the question to change it in different directions that it won't come to fruition in 30 days. That would be my concern with that. Nothing happens because of the difference between the gross and the net tax system just in general. But we'll certainly know a lot more about it when we start seeing it is.
Okay, let me do a quick follow-up to my last question. What do you do with all the extra revenue? I didn't hear any of you talk about an increase in state revenue sharing. Then there would be a case where we could lower our property taxes. I assume none of you are opposed to that. Now I'm going to give you guys a big target. Now we know PPT is fatally flawed, and it's just full of all kinds of corporate welfare provisions. One of the ones that just bothers me is the idea that the industry can hire lobbyists, and those lobbyists work to get you guys to not work in our best interest, but then they can write off those lobbying expenses and we get to pay the bill. That bothers me. And Representative Ramrus, without ever having seen Sarah's revision or her ACES plan, came out publicly and said, you guys should just go down to your special session, you should gavel in, you should reaffirm PPT, and then gavel out. What do you think the chances of that happening are?
It's the rule of 21-11. You have 21 votes in the House, 11 in the Senate. Do anything. But if one body gavels out, 3 days later, they have to come back if the other one doesn't. So basically, if you have the numbers, I don't know if there's any numbers on the table that says that. I think there's factions and factions in caucus that feel different ways. I think we're likely to be down there for a good part of 30 days.